Welcome to Nobilis Erotica, the best science fiction and fantasy erotica anthology podcast in the known universe. This month, science fiction gender fuckery BDSM. This is episode 500. I am Nobilis Reed. You guys. Episode 500. Our author, Cecilia Tan, has arguably made more of a difference in the field of speculative erotica than any other human being on planet Earth. As the founder and editor-in-chief of Circlet Press, over the past 30 years she has published dozens of novels and short story anthologies. She's also the author of the steampunk novel The Blossoms of Summer, the billionaire BDSM romance Struck by Lightning series, starting with Slow Surrender, which was winner of the RT Reviewer's Choice Award in Erotic Romance, and the Magic University series. All that, and there's baseball too. This story is narrated by the author. Before we get started, however, I have an important announcement. The Nobilis Erotica podcast is going on hiatus. The reasons for this are varied, but they all boil down to one thing. I'm exploring new opportunities. There won't be any new stories for a few months. The Patreon campaign is being paused for the duration, and our call for submissions is closed. With all that, stay subscribed to the podcast feed. As these opportunities I am pursuing evolve, I'll post news and information in this feed, and you'll want to hear it. But let's do the story. Here we go.
Personalize Your Netherparts by Cecilia Tan, read by the author. There aren't enough expletives in all the languages I know to express what I feel when I alight from the train at the Horizon Plaza station on my way to work and catch sight of the ad for PYN Tech on the billboard that runs up the side of our building. The building is 14 stories high, 172 feet, which means that the anatomically correct 100% lifelike penis that the ad depicts is at least 171 feet long. It stares at me as if the slit at the top is actually a single eye on a monstrous alien worm. And then the words appear along it, as if the erect flesh has been tattooed with fine taffeta nano ink, the swirling blackwork calligraphy rainbowing as if an invisible hand is stroking upward. I don't even have a penis, and I clench my thighs at the thought of getting tattooed there. "All this can be yours," the lettering reads, and then a second line appears. "Easy alternate genitalia, now in reach." The slogan is then occluded by a host of hands reaching for it, fingers just barely about to close around the turgid flesh, when the advertisement blinks out, leaving only the PYN Tech logo spinning like a penny. I take off my googs and look with the naked eye, half hoping that the ad was only visible in AR, but I can still see the logo. A tamer ad for climate-resistant house paint follows. Thank goodness. So much for Jerry's promise that if we did any advertising, it would be tasteful and not push boundaries. The ink is barely dry on the court case that established this loophole. While real nudity is still considered illegal to display in public, artistic facsimiles, including the very lifelike, are allowable. And what we make at PYN Tech, or Peen Tech, are definitely facsimiles. Jerry will never understand that if the ruling is reversed, it will likely be because of antics like his. I'm seething, but marketing is his job, not mine, and we established long ago who holds the reins in which department. I enter the building through the lobby doors, right around where a blobby bear ball sack had been minutes ago. I take the elevator up to my office on the lab level, which would be right below where the V-shaped crown peaked. This, honestly, is not where I thought I'd end up when I started studying vat-grown meat in college. In grad school, I thought I was so lucky to land a spot in Dr. Kentaro Henry's lab where they perfected the technique of growing Wagyu-style ribeye. The legendary story of how a young Ken brought a barbecue grill to thesis defense is, of course, well known. The idea was to grow edible meat cells in a lab in a manner that was efficient and environmentally friendly, but also created the texture and flavor that previously could only be created by an actual animal walking or swimming around. I was the one to introduce artificial nerve endings. It had started out purely as a way to try to get the muscle fibers to contract in a more energy-efficient way. I wasn't the one who dreamed of making sex toys out of it. No, that had been Jerry, which was not really a surprise when you consider that back then, Jerry thought about sex about as often as I thought about nucleotides. Some things don't change. As I edit the elevator and try to stride past the cubicles of his media team to get to my own office as quickly as possible, his arm appears around my waist and he sweeps me in a circle like a ballroom dancer. He's clearly been lying in wait for me. Did you see it? You love it, don't you? When he says the word love, he growls like some kind of beast. No, Jay, I don't love it, I say, barely deterred by his choreography in my march toward the lab. Various underlings of his are staring, or pretending not to. I'm about to launch into a diatribe about how, even if our corporate legal liability didn't just skyrocket, there are a billion other reasons not to just force thousands of commuters a day to look at a giant dick on the side of our building. But as I glance back at him, I see his effusive glee has deflated to a sullen, wounded look. I settle for, "It was a bad idea, and you know it." He sighs and turns in the direction of the elevator as I'm unlocking the entry to my lab. Then he spins back and says, in his most neutral voice, "You used to think it was a thing of beauty." I suddenly understand the wounded look. That wasn't just any vat-grown phallus, was it? Only Jerry would think himself a genius for flashing his own genitalia at the whole city. I want it down before the first stockholder complains, I say, in a sharp tone I haven't used with him in years, and if it's too late for that already, then... I'm at a loss for what to say. If this were one of the games we used to play, there would be some excruciating punishment awaiting him, something I would dole out bit by bit while ramping up my own pleasure. But this isn't one of those games. I apply the best, worst threat I have in my arsenal. Then I'll issue a recall for your model and you'll have to hand it over by the end of the day. I've never seen his jaw actually drop before. This isn't one of those practiced, dramatic looks. He's genuinely shocked. You wouldn't! I would. I can, and I will. Take it down, Jerry, from everywhere. The door beeps as it acknowledges my presence and slides open. Or else! I step in and the door slides shut, coming between us like a jealous mother-in-law. On the laboratory side of the portal, puffs of air and disinfecting light greet me. At the end of the intake chamber, I go into the locker room to change my clothes. It takes me about 10 minutes to get suited up to enter the sterile area. By the time I reach my desk, in an office overlooking the vat farm on floor 12, I can already see the alert light blinking in the upper right corner of my Googs. Priority message. Aziz, my AI assistant, may not be as smart as a real human, but it knows when to flag an email from Peentech's biggest shareholder. The alert is amber, but I am seeing red. Sure enough, they are not happy, and neither am I. Having made the threat, I have to make good on it. After forwarding the email to Jerry to deal with, I push a recall notice for his appliance, which, after all, technically belongs to Peentech and not to him. Then I send him a back-channel TM message as well. I want it on my desk by lunchtime. His reply scrolls past my eyes. Can't it wait till morning? I shoot back, think texting, why, hot date tonight? The lack of a snappy reply makes me think I'm right. Sometimes I hate being right. I spend the morning with a couple of our endocrinologists. They're fairly giddy. They're so close to being able to implement artificial insemination, they think we should start lining up real test subjects. Within 6 months, they say, they think they'll have an implant for the Peen 180 that will be able to deliver viable sperm into a natural womb. Viable artificial wombs are still a couple of years away. That's the holy grail as far as I'm concerned, because it would mean we could position ourselves as a real, viable family planning alternative and gain the ironclad ability to market to and through the healthcare industry instead of what we are now, which is designer sex toys for the elite. It galls me to no end that we can't already market ourselves as life-affirming, gender-affirming care for trans, non-binary, and gender-fluid folks. Too many laws still on the books from the 2020s. But with the vat farms now at full capacity, we've been able to drop the price to something reasonably affordable. Getting new genitals for your midlife crisis is now cheaper than a sports car, and certainly less passé. I know the moment Jerry arrives. My assistants are convinced I'm psychic because my head always goes up like a meerkat's right before the visitor alert chimes, but it's actually that I can feel the slight change in air pressure in the lab whenever someone enters the intake chamber, and he's the only person I'm expecting at midday. I have my assistant direct him to my private lab, which is already prepped for an appliance removal. Another back-channel crawl stripes my vision. You're really going to leave me defenseless? I reply, defenseless? Are you going to a dick duel or something? Tiv, please, I know you're angry. I know that's why you're doing this. Or you would have offered me a loaner. I don't reply. He's right. I'm doing this to punish him. When I enter the lab, he's sitting there on the procedure table, completely nude, stroking himself shamelessly while he talks to his peen like it's a kitten and I'm a veterinarian. He finally looks up to meet my gaze. If you really need a loaner, I say, Cal's got a prototype of the dolphin we've been working on. Jerry's eyes light up. Are you serious? It's the female dolphin, I clarify. To my surprise, this dims his enthusiasm not at all. Is it the spiral-shaped bottlenose one? It is. I cross my arms, looking him up and down. 20 years ago, we were just horny grad students with a dream. 10 years ago, I had to hack our own building security system to black out this lab just to make sure we weren't unintentionally providing an in-house porn feed to employees. I mean, it was research, technically. But that was then. We stopped not long after that, around the time the Forbes profile came out, the one with the infamous quote that described me as married to my work and Jerry as just sleeping with it. That was right before the company went public, and so did Jerry's marriage to a supermodel whose name I can't even remember. The marriage was quite short-lived. His hair is artificially blonder now, to hide the gray, but his cheeks are just as plump, his smirk just as insouciant. He swallows, sobering a bit under my examination. I know I went too far. I put my gloved hand on his shoulder and ease him back onto the biometric gel pad so I can glance at his vitals. Do you? If I didn't, do you think I'd actually let you do this to me, TV? He's searching my face, and I wonder what he's looking for. I'm sorry, I let my ego run away with me. Yeah, an egomaniac tech CEO is so 2020s, I say. He smirks at my joke. You always were the only one who could put me in my place. I open my mouth to jokingly ask if I should give him a spanking as well, but before the words can reach my mouth, I realize I'm not joking. The surge of emotion that rushes up through me feels hot, but it's not anger, not anymore. It makes my spine feel like steel and my face flushes. You've proved you can't be trusted with your toy, so I'm taking it away, I say. And I think you deserve a spanking. His gasp and the thrill on his face make him look like he's reached the peak of a roller coaster that's about to plummet. Whatever you wish. It takes a mere gesture to get him to flip over and show me his ass. On his back is an extensive tattoo of a pair of angel wings. The ink looks black at first, but I know that wherever I touch it, it'll sparkle with iridescence. He groans as his still erect peen presses into the gel pad under him, and I rub my gloved hands in preparation. The first smack on his bottom startles me with how loud it sounds in the sterile room. I try to match it exactly on the other buttock, and he groans again, humping the table. I cluck my tongue. You're enjoying this far too much. You'll take the rest of the spanking after the removal. He whimpers, but he obediently turns back over. When our products are installed, typically the recipient is given sedation similar to what one would have during a colonoscopy. It isn't strictly necessary, but psychologically it seems to aid the adjustment for people who have never had alternate genitals before. Jerry's an old pro, though. We also usually advise a new recipient to allow at least 6 hours for the full graft to integrate neurally. For Jerry and me, though, it really only takes about 30 minutes, sometimes less. We used to jokingly refer to it as the refractory period. I'm going to engage the restraints to keep you from wiggling around since I'm not going to sedate you, I say. Of course, he says, voice high with apprehension. I surmise it's been a while since Jerry's been restrained. The setup of the procedure table is all too convenient for this. Of course it is. We designed it that way. I'd forgotten that. I reposition him on his back, thighs and waist strapped down to keep his pelvis immobile, and then I run the cannula across his upper lip with the 2 small prongs in his nostrils. He breathes deep and then whimpers as I flood his system with the neurochemical signal that tells the nanobots to disengage. Even without sedation, it should make him feel pretty spacey. He hums but falls silent as my hands search his skin. Not long after, I'm able to find the seam between the real Jerry and his, quote, cosmetic appliance, unquote. He whimpers a bit as I peel it free and plop it into the receptacle tray. It's been years since I've seen Jerry au naturel. He's hairless, and his enormously engorged clit peeks from between smooth lips. How are you going to spank me if I'm strapped down like this, he asks, pupils as big as fairy tale saucers. I let out an evil laugh of surprise, because until he asked, I hadn't thought that far ahead. But now, it's obvious. Give me your hands. I place his hands on his vulva, one on either side, pressing his lips together so that the ripened blackberry of his clit protrudes above his knuckles by a good half-inch or so. He trembles. You wouldn't. I would. I take up the ruler we use to measure specimens and anatomical positions. It's a clear, rigid plastic, with inch markings up one side and centimeters up the other. I'm sure you've taken one of these across the knuckles before when you were naughty, He swallows, and his answer comes out a whisper. Yes, TV. I wonder if he remembers his safe word. Not that I think he'd use it. Not when he thinks he deserves this. Count, I say, as I raise the ruler and bring it down with a loud smack. He grits his teeth, jaw tight, processing the pain of the blow before gasping out, 1. I let the silence stretch as I savor the moment. It feels almost like the pain rippled through the air itself, caressing me like a luxurious breeze. Then I prompt him. And? He grimaces as if to silently ask me if we have to do it this way. My silence and raised eyebrow insist that, yes, we do. He sighs and adds, May I have another? I nod and position the hand holding the ruler right beside where I want it to strike, pulling it back with my other hand, ready to let it go at any moment. He cringes but can't bring himself to look away either. The ruler snaps downward and leaves a stripe across his knuckles, but where he feels it most, I know, is right on that hypersensitive knob of erect flesh. 2, he croaks out. May I have another? Yes, you certainly may. I let him have it again and again. I draw in a long, slow breath. It's like each time I hit him there, I'm pressing a button wired right to my own pleasure centers. I know we shouldn't go past 10, though. Not unless I want to risk actually damaging him, right? When we get to 10, though, he just grits his teeth and says, May I have another? Do you feel you deserve another? I ask. I can feel my own arousal all the way from the soles of my feet through my gut, right to the end of my hand. Or have you learned your lesson? He seems to be struggling with words, or maybe with himself somehow. I deserve whatever correction you deem necessary, TV. But... He bites his lip, squeezing his eyes shut on tears? Jerry? I say his name to remind him to be present, to remind him of himself and of me. But what? I deserve to be punished, but would my tormentor please? He turns his head away as if embarrassed to look at me, and he answers, Please use your own hand? I'm not entirely sure what's going on in Jerry's mind, but I agree. Very well. I brush a teardrop from his eyelashes with my thumb. But it means starting the count over. He closes his eyes and whispers, "As you wish." So, that means 10 more smacks, right on the pubis, catching his clit with the fat part of my palm on each one. I don't tease him this time. I give him a few seconds between blows, but otherwise I am relentless, each one harder than the previous, putting every ounce of my annoyance and frustration and exasperation into hitting him right there. He's weeping by the end, like maybe he knows this has not only cracked him open, it's cracked me open too. I see it clearly then. This is what he wanted all along. The dick billboard was all a gamble to try to get my attention. This kind of attention. And part of me says I shouldn't be giving him what he wants. That's no way to teach him a lesson. If he's going to have a shred of humility after this, instead of just a smug surety that he can do it again, I know I have to make sure he's completely undone. The tears are a good start, but... I changed the flow of the gas to prep him to accept the new appliance, the dolphin vagina. In his extremely aroused state, the graft should take to him quickly. He moans as I secure his hands into restraints, just because I can, and then I begin the fitting. While it's settling, I press my mouth to his, breathing in the sweet odor of the mixture. He gasps as I suck on his breath. Has he guessed why I want a hit of the neurogas? Perhaps he has when I start stripping out of my scrubs. I haven't been this aroused in years. And I haven't worn a peen in years either. My sexuality was never as tied to gender or genitalia as much as it was to dominance and submission, to sadism and masochism. But sometimes genitalia, whether real or applied, can play a part in that. I take up Jerry's dick and graft it onto myself. It feels pendulous, and only more so as it fills, lengthens, thickens. I stroke it roughly with one hand and then rub it against the edge of the table, enjoying the pain in myself as much as his groans and feeble attempts to tell me to be careful with it. You'd rather I rubbed it up and down right here, I suppose, I say, as I find the area that is the dolphin clit and thrust hard against it. The sound he makes is nearly as high-pitched as a dolphin. The dolphin vagina is twisty inside and lubricates itself well, and fucking it is possibly one of the most pleasurable sensations I've ever had. It feels like more than just the dick is receiving the sensation. It's like all of me is being plunged into pleasure, and the harder I fuck, the better it feels. Orgasm is inevitable, but it is not what will satisfy me. Only Jerry's utter capitulation, only the complete deflation of his ego through the humiliation of being fucked utterly senseless by his own cock, only the absolute loss of sense and perspective that will come from begging me to abase him even more, to deny him orgasm until after I've come in every orifice of his available to me, both real and grafted, including down his throat, onto his face. What? You think we'd design a cock that could only come once? After all that, he's reduced to just blubbering the word please over and over, with the occasional "I promise to be good" thrown in for variety. I ungraft the dolphin appliance and run his own fingers up and down his bare clit until he's just shuddering uncontrollably. I keep frigging mercilessly until he's come so many times he can no longer move at all, unless you count his fluttering eyelids, and he barely has the energy to beg me to stop. Then, and only then, am I satisfied. Hours later, he sits up on the couch in my office, waking up to find I've restored the Peen 180 to him, and he surprises me again, this time by breaking down in tears for the second time that day. I drape a blanket over his shoulders, my touch triggering the rainbow effect on the feathers of his tattoo. I take it you just realized you're on your own to explain to all your afternoon appointments why you blew them off? I hand him a tissue to dab his eyes with. Or are those tears of relief now that you can go on that hot date you had planned for tonight? He just shakes his head like he can't stop weeping. I feel a chill of fear that I've misread him and pushed him too far. Jerry, you okay? He lets out a long breath and wipes his eyes. What do you think? Would I have made a humongous, self-destructive bid for your attention if I was okay? My arm feels heavy where my hand rests on his shoulder. I suppose not, but wasn't it you who said I didn't turn you on anymore? He looks up at me. I may have been trying to protect myself from feeling rejected by you by rejecting you first? That is the mindset that leads to humongous, self-destructive bids for attention instead of, just asking me. He rocks in place slightly, hugging himself. I can guess what he's thinking about. He's thinking about the whole married to my work thing and how I have maybe 1/10 of the sex drive he has and all the reasons we've been many kinds of partner but never the romantically pair-bonded kind. His voice is small. Would you have said yes? We'll never know because you didn't ask. I stand and then lean down to kiss him on the forehead and hand him a bottle of rehydrating solution. I've got to get down to vat inspection. He just nods and sucks greedily on the solution. He won't see my back channel addition until he puts his googs on. Next time, ask me first, and I don't mean about advertising.
And that's our story. Once again, this will be the last story for a while. The podcast is going on indefinite hiatus. Stay subscribed, however, because I'll be putting updates and news in the feed as this goes along. You have my apologies for being vague about this, but with luck, I'll be more specific in the future. You have been listening to the Novellas Erotica podcast. Theme music is composed and performed by Mass Relay. This podcast is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. Until next time, listen hard.